One of the leaders in the team was very adamant that was a bad idea. And I didn't agree because it made so much sense from a theoretical point of view. So we started the project of breaking down the monolith into services and ended up failing.
Fabrice Bernhard, co-founder of Thedo, a leading tech consultancy. He scaled to 700 people and 100 million in revenue, co-author of the Lean Tech Manifesto, and a pioneer in AI-powered IT modernization, helping organizations break free from legacy systems.
The popular phrase now in my world is like psychological safety, creating cultures where people should feel free to speak up and share ideas without fear of shame or retribution.
Don't shoot the messenger. That's rule number one. If you want to say it in a positive way, you welcome the problem.
What's your take on AI and what's its relationship to Lean, and is it a threat?
How do we keep people engaged and how do we keep them thinking? And again, lean thinking has dealt with that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode where we talk about business problems that are actually people problems. Today, we have Fabrice Bernhard. He's the co-founder and CTO of Thedo, fast-growing tech consultancy that he built from the ground up into a multi-country group with hundreds of engineers. In the process of scaling a world-class engineering firm, Fabrice had a realization that the problems blocking his teams were never entirely technical, but they were also very human problems, and that the solution wasn't always a better framework and cleaner code or a more elegant architecture. It was really about trust, empathy, psychological safety, and teamwork, and a hard, unglamorous work of getting people to genuinely hear each other out. That realization became the foundation of his approach to building high performance tech teams and ultimately the subject of his book, The Lean Tech Manifesto, which adapts the principles of Toyota's lean production system for modern software world. At the heart of it is a very simple idea that the highest leverage thing as a leader can do is not optimize the system, but rather create the conditions in which people can solve problems together. So, Fabrice splits his time between Paris and London, and he continues to lead Theodo's growth and methodology. Thank you, Fabrice, for joining my podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
I know that was a very robust intro, and it's all true. But just tell us a little bit more about yourself and about Thedo, and even if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I realize I've only seen it in writing, but I haven't heard it said out loud. But if you could just give us a little bit more about your background, and then we can get started.
Yes, perfect. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. I think it was actually very solid. I might risk repeating some of what you said, but yeah. So we're a tech consultancy. We started this back in 2009 with my co-founder Benoit. We're now about 800 people. Just crossed like the 100 million revenue mark. So I'm one of the two co-founders. I am the geeky one. I've been coding since I'm about 10. I'm also I don't want to criticize Benoit's English, but I might be the one speaking better English, which is why I ended up in London, growing our international branch there. Yes, that's about it. And you mentioned the book. I've got it next to me, so I can like show you the cover. This is the result. I'm gonna show it for longer. This is the result of 4 years of hard work, writing, capturing all the learnings from at the time 12 years of practicing lean thinking with some of the best lean experts in the world in our industry. And at some point, we realized we were some of the first ones to actually bring so much lean expertise in software engineering, and that deserved sharing it with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that's why we wrote the book.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about your own personal professional progression. Like when did it go from, purely relying on your technical expertise, if that was ever even the case, to really, expanding what leadership means to you today?
So it definitely was technical expertise at the beginning. My first company, actually straight out of university, was a website called anomatch.com, which was the website to find bars and restaurants where to watch sports. And I built it myself. So the first version I built myself. Then we had a whole rewrite. And I must say, working on it as a team, but clearly at the time, these were individual contributions. They were very unequal. And I remember one of the guys I worked hard with said, this wouldn't have worked if you hadn't worked late at nights, every night, 7 days a week as the founder you were. So clearly this was relying a bit too much on my technical abilities at the time. And I remember, to go in the topic that you're addressing here, I remember my biggest tech failure. Like, so we start having a technical team, we start structuring it, and I remember imposing an architecture decision on the team, which was to break down our monolith into services. And one of the leaders in the team was very adamant that was a bad idea. And I didn't agree because it made so much sense from a theoretical point of view. And so we started the project of breaking down the monolith into services, ended up failing. It took me all this failure to finally understand, and also for this other person to kind of, make it more explicit what they meant, which was that the idea on paper was great. The working environment at the time to make it happen was not good enough. There weren't enough frameworks that allowed you to implement that kind of architecture, and it was still quite new. So there wasn't like a lot of teaching material on the internet. And therefore, what I was asking the team was basically to do something that they have no framework to help them with, no training material to help them with. So basically, so on the paper it was good. In reality, it was not going to work because the team was not going to be able to succeed at doing it, and the outcome was as predicted. I would say an implementation failure, and that's when I realized, it was the first time I realized you have to take into account the working environment that you're providing before you make a purely technical decision.
And when you say working environment, what does that include, like concretely?
Yeah, nowadays I would say working environment. At the time, it would have been really take into account the skill sets, the level of competence of the team, which is, I think, extremely important. Very, very underestimated, by the way, by the whole of society nowadays. So yeah, skill sets, competence, but it also means, and when I mean working environment, there is actually a lot of tech around that. What are the toolings? What are the regulations, the compliance constraints that you're adding to the working environment? And then how much support are you giving the team? Are the managers good problem-solving coaches?
Ah,
Or are they just kind of, telling people what to do and then disappearing until it's done,
uh,
and then coming back to criticize it? So yeah, working environment is really the mix of the technology enabling the work, the competence of the team, and the support of the management structure.
when you talk about the competence of the team, how do you look for that now earlier on in the process? Is it a matter of doing a skills test, or I don't know, how have you refined the process? Is it something you look out for more in the interview process? Or
So it's interesting because there's really two aspects to that. Of course, in the interviewing process, I think it's incredibly important to evaluate current skill set and, also the person's mindset towards learning. And we try to hire Thedo people who have a positive outlook towards learning and towards continuous improvement. And that's very, very important to people that, want to improve, want to become better, and know that they will get that as a benefit from working at Thedo. But for my first reaction when you asked the question, I think it's a good one, is actually it's the manager's role on a project to break down what skills mean for that particular project.
to the
And so
project?
we have a tool at Thedo that we don't use enough, but that we use on quite a few projects, called the skills matrix,
Ah,
where the team leader or the project manager can break down the technical skills that's are required to succeed on the project. Maybe not at all times, will be required during the project, and then people can self-evaluate on these skills. You don't need to make it that complicated, but just to have a visual of who is comfortable on what.
okay.
Especially engineers, they're very good at self-evaluating. I mean, very good. They're not lying. So they will say, this is something I know,
Yeah.
this is something I'm actually very proud and I can
Mm,
teach someone,
mm.
and this is something I know nothing of, so I will need support. And having that visual management means that you can actually look at the work coming up in the next week or next
Yeah.
2 weeks, and look at, is there a gap between the people who are going to work on this and the skills they have at the moment, and then you can plan trainings accordingly. And when I'm saying skills, I'm talking about stuff that you can actually teach, not to a huge mastery level, but at least to a level of, okay, I'm not completely lost on that in a matter of half an hour, for example.
And are these when the skills assessment, is it all you said it was technical skills, but are any of them maybe managerial skills or more, soft skills using,
Yes, when I'm talking about the skills matrix, I'm talking mostly about technical skills.
Yeah.
I would call every skill technical.
Fair, yeah.
uh, I think people skills are teachable,
Yeah.
and therefore, what's the difference with a technical skill? But yeah, I would say that the people skills we kind of mentioned, which would be how to lead, how to manage, how to negotiate, how to deal with conflict. They're usually harder skills to learn. So that would be, and we actually do that. Trying
Right.
to do that. We provide that more as a kind of a continuous training opportunities. Yeah, that's not the kind of thing you can actually learn in for the next week if that's what you need.
And do you provide that through formal training opportunities, or is it part of, this sort of knowledge sharing you were mentioning earlier about, like, people sharing skills that they're already
I would say we do everything. We have formal management training. We have dojos, which are more informal, regular sessions where people can learn by looking at previous work done and comparing it to what the ideal standard says it should be. We've got on-the-job training, as I mentioned, and then we've got a very, very powerful tool at Thedo, and probably the most powerful, which is very regular problem solving.
Yeah, tell me more about that because you talked about that, problem-solving coaching, and what does that mean in the context of your world?
Yeah, so it means something very specific. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's good to be more precise about it. So in lean thinking, one of the key so lean thinking is the body of knowledge around what makes Toyota such an incredible company. And so in lean thinking, you one of the big ideas is that you welcome problems. So you want to look at problems and you want to solve them collectively. And first, the question is, what is a problem? So, a problem is really, so there's a whole art at defining a problem, which is really trying to make it, quantify it, so make it, clarify it by translating it into a gap to a standard, a gap to kind of an ideal situation. So that's a problem. And then the whole idea of a lean company is to create this culture where people will very regularly identify problems, so identify gaps, and then use a systematic approach at analyzing them and learning from them. The management structure then becomes a supporting structure in that problem solving. So they will provide coaching on the problem solving skills, and they will also provide coaching, mentoring, expertise on potentially when you dive deep into the technical problems that you're facing. And this is an amazing way to learn. Yeah, it's much more effective for a lot of reasons, and science-backed reasons. One of them is that the learning happens very close to the problem, so that means your brain is finding the learning very relevant, and emotionally it will stick much harder, and much more strongly. And it also means that you focus on the gaps. If something didn't work as expected, it's probably because you didn't have the skill to make it work as expected. So you're really focusing the training on what are my skill gaps, and not very generic content of which you might know already know
Might be
90%.
relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and more generally, it's just like it's a bit like going to the gym. It's the daily practice to muscle your brain
Yeah.
and to strengthen your brain, which of course is particularly relevant today with AI being accused, and I think rightly so, at making us a bit more lazy about thinking.
Okay, I definitely wanna go down that path at some point, but before we go there, tell me more about what made you decide to write a book, and what were you hoping to achieve with writing it?
So first, because one of the main reasons for writing a book was underestimating how hard it is. It is probably one of the hardest things I've done in my life.
Oh, wow, that says something.
Yeah, no, it's super hard. And it's super hard because you're confronting what you think you know about something to a blank piece of paper, and then realizing that your understanding is actually very fuzzy. And to get it to a much better place, you need to structure your thoughts, and that is a very long digestion problem. And then, of course, once you have structured your thoughts, you realize you do need to back them a bit with science.
Yeah.
There's a whole research around that. And sometimes the research actually doesn't support what you think. So then you change your
That's
thinking. So there's
inconvenient.
yeah,
Some real
okay.
time, yeah.
But it's, of course, the output of that is that you become so much more, yeah, so much smarter and wiser about the topics that you thought you were an expert in. But that's actually the step of writing the book is what makes you become a true expert, I think. So yeah, so what was the outcome? I think, I mean, that's one of the reasons I underestimated the hard work, and one an unexpected outcome was that actually it made me much wiser on the topics I thought I was already good at. No, and the reason we really did this is because we really believe in lean thinking as a better way of running an organization or a society. It focuses on developing people, on making them collaborate together better, and on working on the real problems and having the courage to face them. And yeah, and I love this way of working. I don't think it's an easy way of working, but I think it's a much better way of working. And I think it was important to keep it alive as an alternative, like as a management option, basically, to show that it was possible to adopt it in a tech environment. So yeah, so I did it for I'd say a higher purpose of sharing these ideas, which I think are very valuable for society.
I mean, prior to Lean, how were people operating before? Like, what was the prevalent was it just launch and iterate and go fast and break things and all the like, what before, before it was memorialized as such as lean thinking, like, how did people operate?
You mean in society or at Thedo?
Let's start with Thedo and then in tech.
Yeah, no, I think at Thedo we started a bit like, we started as founders, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, and that was very much kind of skunk works way of working, which works really well
What was
but
the term
doesn't
you used?
scale.
Skunkworks?
Skunk works.
For those of us who aren't in
Uh,
tech, tell us what skunkworks is.
no, it's not very tech. It probably comes from engineering. I think so Skunkworks was invented at Lockheed Martin, and it's basically the idea that if you put a very small team of very talented people together and give them no structure, things will come out, that are very interesting. So basically structureless collaboration as a small team. And then when we start growing a bit, then we did what most organizations do, which is start creating processes and start implementing rules around these processes, and then, starting creating a management structure around enforcing the processes, and which I would call the bureaucratic approach. And the bureaucratic approach is a necessary evil. You can't scale to hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people in your organization without having an administrative structure that explains how things should be done and, checks whether they're actually being done that way. But you do want to reduce it as much as possible. And you definitely don't need it when you're 12. And even when you're hundreds, you need to have quite a few countermeasures to the downsides of a bureaucratic environment. And one of the huge downsides of the bureaucratic environment is that you start being more and more focused on the process and less on the customer. And of course, the example we all experience as customers is when you need something and somebody tells you, "Oh, we can't do that. It's not allowed. The process doesn't allow for it." You're like, "Yeah, but there must be some exception for me." So what lean thinking brings to that is giving a lot more autonomy on the people on the ground to solve problems and keep the focus on value for the customer. And that creates an organization that is a lot less bureaucratic, but that can still scale because it does that around kind of a bureaucratic structure, let's say.
Okay. Kind of like the best
So
of both
in
worlds. If yeah. Oh.
yeah, best of both worlds is yeah, it's that's the way you should describe it. Like
Yeah.
it's got the scaling ability of bureaucracy in a sense, but it's got the autonomy and innovation ability of teams that problem solve and focus on value and don't stop just at the process.
No.
And so one of the big ideas of lean thinking is that you don't call document processes, you document standards,
Okay.
which is the best way of doing something at the time according to the team. But these documents are used as training material. They're not used as
Like doctrine.
compliance rules
Yeah.
that you need to follow blindly. And this means that when you problem solve, you accept the idea that once in a while things will not happen as expected, or very often actually. And then you can decide whether you need to train people better or whether you need to improve the standard because things have changed on the market, etc. So that's a kind of a big idea. To come back to your initial question, which was what was before, I'm not an expert in these things, but I would say there's a whole Taylorism phase where we go from everything being handcrafted by craft people, and then Taylor arrives, Fordism, and instead of having craft people building each piece by hand, you start cutting the work in small pieces and specializing people and forcing the right way to do that little step without having the bigger picture. So that was a lot more efficient, but also very disempowering for people. So that's one big downside, and that means usually less quality, or at least quality will reduce, and also less flexibility because people don't have the bigger picture. So when things change, they will continue implementing their little step. And I would say that Toyota arrived in the 50s and reinvented that because they had other constraints, they were lacking resources, they were lacking money, and they had to think differently about how to build cars. And the Western world discovered that what they were doing in the late 80s, basically. And so we're still late 80s is a long time ago, or not that long ago, depends how you look at it. I would say it's not that long ago because we're still discovering things. We've had this whole phase where we discovered the manufacturing aspects, but now we're discovering the engineering aspects of Toyota. And that, I think, of course, is a lot more interesting because that's where the real secret of the value of Toyota comes from, is how they use Lean to engineer and design better cars. And of course, much more relevant in our very tech-focused age, where engineers are building software that runs everything. Understanding how Toyota approaches engineering is fascinating and full of learnings.
Do you have, just to bring the point home to people, especially those who maybe never worked with a tech company, can you share like a story whereby, you know, implementing lean led to significantly better outcomes than if they hadn't, or where not implementing it led to seriously adverse outcomes? Just something to like understand, like, you know, what is the, I don't want to say the return, but like the benefits of, taking all the aspects of lean into account.
It's not such an easy question because I think what is amazing about Lean is the culture it creates.
Okay, tell me
So
more
you
about
create
that.
a culture
Yeah.
of a lot of of people doing more continuous improvement than in other companies. And so you can see the results at big picture. Toyota is the biggest, most profitable car company in the world.
Yeah.
At a very, very humble level, Thedo, has had a successful, fast growth
Yeah.
for the last 14 years now.
Yeah.
And Lean clearly helped us scale while keeping customer satisfaction very high. and also employee recommendation high.
I mean, I know, the popular phrase now in my world is like psychological safety and like creating cultures where people should feel free to speak up and share ideas without fear of like shame or retribution. It sounds like that's implicit in this lean culture. Would you say that's the case?
I think, I mean, I did research psychological safety a lot. I found it very interesting. And I was wondering, how does Amy Edmondson actually explain how to achieve psychological safety? And when you look at what she says, it looks very much like what lean leaders do. Focus on the problem, not on the people, and then support people in analyzing the problem.
And what tell me
So
more
you
about
feel
that
much
support.
safer.
Yeah, tell me what that support looks like. Is it
Yeah. So
holding
very
their
concretely
hand?
speaking,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a very good question. So very concretely speaking, tomorrow, if you want to, be more of a lean leader, one first aspect is when somebody arrives with bad news, you don't blame them, you don't attack them. So you don't shoot the messenger. That's really like rule number one. Or if you want to say it in a positive way, you welcome the problem. And that's very, very important. And there's so many good examples of organizations that create that culture. So once you welcome the problem, that's good. So at least the people in the company will feel safe to share problems. And then, of course, the question is, a problem creates anxiety. So step one is to not be blamed for a problem and not want to hide it. But step two is to actually feel that you're not left alone with your problem. And what you do in Lean is you will then coach the
Sorry,
person
just to
in analyzing the problem.
just going deeper on that, how do you help people feel less alone or less isolated? Like, what is involved in that? Is it a question of the language you use with them? Is it a question of, what does that look like? It sounds intimate
Very
for,
concretely
a business.
speaking,
Yeah.
being I don't know. I think what I mean by that is just sitting next to them and
Mm.
analyzing the problem together.
Oh, yeah. So just as simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but I think one of the important aspects of that is approaching it in a bit of in a systematic way. So you're not talking about the problem, you're using the scientific method to analyze the problem, and then Lean, you have like plenty of tools to analyze problems. Tools that are adapted to like a 15-minute analysis, tools that are adapted to like a kind of a 3 months exploration. So there's different tools for different sizes of problems and different time scales. And as a lean leader, you master a few of these tools, and you use them to coach the person. So typically, one of the first tools we implemented at Thedo, we actually changed since, but one of the first tools we implemented was called PISCAR,
Okay.
and it would be, okay, let's write the problem as a quantifiable gap to a standard.
Okay.
And then that was P. And then I was, what is the impact for the client? Can we clarify that it's actually a relevant problem? It could be a problem that has no impact, then who cares? Then S was for standard. Okay, how should things work? What are the different steps of the process or whatever, and where is it actually breaking? Kind of like visualizing the thing. And C is causes. So can we come up with ideas of potential causes? Ideally 7, and this is where as a leader you can be good at kind of like coaching the person to look for new, different ways of thinking. And then A was for action. So what are the potential countermeasures that you could implement that would validate or invalidate your ideas about causes? And R for result, what is your expected result?
Okay.
Which is quite an important step to actually
Yeah.
write down what you expect before doing it, so
Yeah.
that you can have a scientific kind of learning out of what you're doing. Nowadays, we've changed it a bit. For example, we've made it slightly simpler. So we will quantify the problem, write the timeline of what happened, and then, draw a causal diagram of what we think are the different causes, and then, come up with countermeasures and expected results. So very concretely, it means sitting next to the person and coaching them through the analysis and teaching them tools to better analyze problems.
All right. And then switching gears here, I know we started talking about AI earlier, so we could broach that subject. You know, is lean a solution only because like humans are imperfect and AI will solve all this and make things more efficient? Or what's your take on AI and what's its relationship to lean? And is it a threat? Is it an enabler for you? Is it neither? I'll let you run with that one.
AI is an amazing technology. It's an automation technology that comes with amazing opportunities and also quite a few dangers.
Okay.
I mean, danger number one, which we're seeing nowadays, is that is like a lot of technologies, people want to implement the technology as an end and not as a means. So you need to put AI everywhere just to put AI everywhere. So of course that makes no sense. And this is where lean thinking's obsession for value is so useful. Like to remind you, the technology is only useful if it actually creates value for the customers as a mean to creating value for the customers. So I think that's an important idea. And to create value for the customers, this is where lean thinking brings you a lot of skills and body of knowledge around not optimizing locally. I mean, increasing the productivity of one team or one person is not going to change anything for the customer unless you look at the thing as a whole, unless you look at the whole value flow and actually start working on how can I improve? So where are the bottlenecks? Where's the work in progress? How can I actually address the whole flow? And then more generally, one of the challenges, the more longer term challenges of AI is really, how do we keep people engaged and how do we keep them thinking? And again, lean thinking has dealt with that exact issue 50 years ago
Okay.
or more actually. So automating a production line with robots
Okay, yeah, I see them. Yeah.
is more expensive and slower than what we do today, but it's actually in terms of like conceptually, it's a similar problem. And when you put robots on the line, you've got some obvious issues, which are, what if things change and the robots is, prompted to do one thing? Well, it's good to have a human around that is in control of the robot and then can do the problem solving. So that's one big aspect. Also, when you give all the fun job to the robot and leave all the shitty job to the humans, because of course the part that is like very, very variable is given to the human, then it's not very motivating. So how do you deal with that? That's something that Toyota had to deal with already back in the 60s and 70s. And so yes, that's why lean thinking I think is incredibly important. And on the engaging thing, I think it's super important to have human-centric AI. And by that I mean AI that serves a human team and where the human team is problem solving issues and improving the whatever implementation, including the AI implementation that is, enabling their work. And of course, AI will have positive aspects, AI will have negative aspects, but if the team is problem solving the negative aspects, then at least it's in control of improving the thing and not, being enslaved by this AI that actually brings a lot of negative aspects. That's, I think, a really important aspect. And then the other aspect is problem solving. I think where AI is very new compared to robots is that AI can think instead of us. And that's incredibly new. Like, it's not completely new because you could argue that Google already did that a bit for us, allowing us, not to have to think or remember things. We just have to, type them in Google. And so I think it's very important to practice our analytical skills and our problem solving skills very regularly, ideally on a daily basis, to keep our brain thinking.
Yeah. Like you said, like exercise, going to the gym. If someone were to come up to you on the street and not on the street, but would want like a few concrete things to really take their team to the next level in terms of being like a problem-solving team, what would be some tips you would give them to either do differently or to start noticing about what their teams are doing currently, so that they could become more high performing or better problem solving?
We started with a coach, a lean coach, and I think it's a body of knowledge that, is not that easy to apprehend. So it's very useful to have somebody help you on that journey. And then we start reading books. So there's a lot of amazing books around these topics. One of them is
Oh,
this one.
you don't say.
And it's got I've got really good feedback from the book. And when I read it again, for a while I couldn't touch it anymore. But I realized it was actually quite enjoyable. So that's one thing. And then, like, very concretely speaking, I think one of the first steps is really creating this culture of problem solving, which requires this huge reframe of, as a leader, welcoming problems, being positive when people tell me about problems, being negative when people hide problems,
Oh, okay, yeah.
making it clear that hiding a problem is a bad thing.
Yeah.
And then learning about problem solving techniques to be able to start coaching
Yeah.
the teams on how to apprehend these problems.
Okay, great. And so I did do my research on your book, and one of the things that was written about it was, they talks about how Kaizen was originally for smaller development teams, and what your book was able to do was move it beyond development into any team, and to also be able to do it at larger scale for like hundreds of people. So first of all, let me know if I got that right. For we work with leaders across all industries, from pharma, banking, legal, you name it. And, for some of them who have no knowledge of lean or agile or any of these things, why is this way of thinking relevant to them, and why should they buy your book?
I think it's incredibly relevant and powerful to outperform your market, to be smarter collectively. As a leader of a company, if you can have an army of problem solvers in your company, you will feel much more confident about the future. And that's what lean thinking is about. It's about creating an organization where everybody becomes a problem solver, and collectively the organization is smarter, and therefore you outperform your market, especially during crisis times. And this is what really Toyota demonstrates. They are growing fast, but every time there's a crisis, they grow much faster than the others. And that's I think the power of lean thinking. And that's very relevant for every organization. I would say it's even more relevant now that we have this huge AI transformation,
Yeah, it's huge disruption.
which is a form of crisis.
Yeah.
Exactly, huge disruption, a form of crisis for quite a few organizations. And at the same time, nobody understands what the future looks like. And so the only way to navigate that is to be faster at learning what works and what doesn't work. And to be faster, you need to have a lot of people that are, doing this learning effort in your organization. And I think that's what lean thinking is about. And that's what lean tech is about, because it's, lean thinking in a tech context.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I think that might be a good place to end things. Do you have any final thoughts or ideas you'd like to share?
Oh, thank you so much for the interview. I hope my genuine passion for spreading lean thinking
It's definitely
has
come
been
across.
felt exactly, has come across through this podcast.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, thanks.